right. So what Tina had suggested is that we focus on the elevator pitch or a 90-second version of what it is you want to say to people about what you're doing. Should you have 90 seconds, which happens more frequently than you would imagine, certainly at a social gathering or on an airplane. You just never know who you're going to run into, and you never know who's got enough curiosity to ask what you're doing. And I also firmly believe that 90-second pitch is a great, if you do it well, is a great structure for a 20-minute talk. So that becomes the outline on which you can hang a lot of other stories and details. And so what works in 20 minutes should work in 90 seconds. And so 90 seconds ends up looking more like an outline version. And I also feel really strongly from, and I don't know how much Tina has said to each of you, but I spent the last 12 years primarily as a coach to scientists and engineers at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Hughes Laboratory, because about 12 years ago, when I was working at Lawrence Livermore, the senior executive team got into a kind of irritating fight among themselves. And the CEO, managing director, asked me to see if I could mediate it and get them back working as a team, although I don't think they were ever working as a team. And it's one of those situations where you had so many really bright people. Everybody's got a doctorate and whatever, and they're 50 years old, and they've been very successful in what they do. And then all of a sudden, they're each managing a couple thousand people. And they're not really managers, they're really excellent scientists. And you need them to be the managers because they're the only ones with enough depth so that you can't pull any wool over their eyes. But when they get into managerial roles, they don't have any social fluency, and it has now become a social fluency job primarily. I mean, they have to know what they know, but they've got to manage a lot of people. And I'm not a communications coach, but they trusted me a lot from other work I had done there, and I'm an outsider, so I was able to come in. And we quickly realized that these people were so deep scientifically and they took so much time in their lives to get that deep that they did it at the expense of socialization. And they really just didn't have it even after 50 years, unless a couple of them maybe grew up in a household where there was a lot of interaction socially, and they picked it up a bit, but no one had any sense of what they should be doing. And so I went to talk to some neuroscientists that I was working with at Stanford. And this was maybe 13 years ago. And they were putting people in scanners and watching people decide to vote or buy or subscribe or support somebody. So they would put somebody in a scanner, and they'd watch the brain, and they would pitch 3 different things to them, and they could see if any of those things became something that that individual would take action to support. And they could see in the amygdala a part of the brain light up when the person had decided to act. Now, they're not talking to the person about what's going on. They're just letting the person see the transaction or see the communication. And then they're watching the brain. And then later, they're asking the person, would they buy, subscribe, vote? And it was absolutely predictable who they would vote for, what they would buy, what they would support based on when the amygdala lit up during that conversation. And so what they realized that even the most scientific individuals who think they operate on rationale don't actually operate that much on rationale. There really is a confluence of things that happen in a pitch or in a conversation, which gets people to subscribe, but it's a pretty complex thing. It's more of an emergent property than a cause and effect deal. And so I said, yeah, okay, that's very interesting. So everybody is really biased in their decision making, even those who think they aren't. And then, do you have any idea? I said, what are the big influencers? And he said, yes, it's pretty interesting. We think a good set of facts and rationale will get you about 10% of the way there. But facts and rationale, a series of facts does not convince anybody of anything generally. What is more convincing is a story. And if you take those facts and you frame them in a story, let's say the facts are worth about 10%, the story is worth about 20. So if you take the facts and the story together, you got about 20% of your way there. I said, so everything needs to be framed in a story structure, basically. And they said, yeah, if you really want to convince anybody of anything. I said, okay, well, that's only 30%. Where's the other? And they said, well, another 30% is in authenticity. Is the story being presented by a person who feels authentic to the listener? And I said, okay, so that still is only 60%. And they said, yeah, the other is appearance. How do you look? It's what's attractive in that culture. Is the person come across as both confident and humble. It's a strange combination, but you kind of have to have both things. You have to be confident enough to tell the story and feel confident about the facts, or it doesn't come off well. But you also kind of have to have some good posture and kind of an open body and an open face. And without those things, you don't get that appearance impact, which is like 40% of the transaction. And then that appearance has to also be authentic, looking, feeling, and it's hard to fake authenticity. So you really kind of have to believe in the story. And you have to believe the facts are right. So so I began, and I said, how old is this science? And they said, well, about a year. But it was the best thing I had. So I went back to the scientists and I said, well, the good news is everybody is trainable, even you. However, the training set is really much more about the performing arts, dance, music, vocal, drama, all the things that actors are taught as a general beginning, even education, is probably what you need the most. And in the scientific community, I know that's a real turnoff for most people. But actually, in your position, you had to be a scientist to get the position, but you've got to be a bit of a performing artist to really do it well. And it involves all these things. So I then began to set up workshops with the acting community in San Francisco. And so we went through the whole gamut from dance to voice to drama. And we taught all the highest level people at Lawrence Livermore those skills. And I only could do it like one at a time because they said, we're going to talk about drama for a day. And they said, yeah. And I said, and if at any point you think it's not relevant, we'll stop. That'll be it. No more workshop. No more program. You just have at it. Everybody trying to be the smartest person in the room. See how that works out going forward. And so they did it, and they actually loved it. So we did a whole year. And then they said, well, no one should work at this lab without this skill set. So I've spent the last 12 years there and trained 2,000 people. And now the people I trained later on are now in charge. So it continues. So with that in mind as a quick background, what we're looking at here is, if you're going to do 90 seconds and that's all you have, it's best shaped in a story structure, and it's best delivered with a lot of authenticity coming through, or it won't land very well. And if you're going to do 20 minutes as a presentation, all those same things apply. It's got to be a story structure. Because it's 20 minutes, it's one story with a lot of little stories hanging off of it, almost like a Christmas tree. And you've got to know that story so well that you don't read it or read your own slides, which is a massive problem. So with that in mind, I thought today what we could do is just focus on 90 seconds. And I'd asked Gina if we could get 2 of those. Evidently, we can only do 1, and that's fine. And it sounds like Chris could give us the model so far that Chris is using. Have I got that right, Tina?
No, I'm sorry, that it's probably on me. I think, Chris, you prepared a 20-minute, right?
I did, but what I am very interested in, Bob, is I have a lot of stuff, and we need a 90 minutes on this, not just as the DNA for larger things, but even 90 seconds is a magic unit of time for Instagram messages that you put out. So I laid it out to the guys who are on this call, some of them yesterday during our little workshop for a first run, but I don't know if that would be useful. I could try to 90 second it. That might be a useful exercise, or I could share more, and you could help me trim the tree and identify what the 90 seconds is.
Good. Well, I think we have plenty of time. We're just going to be working on your thing today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got plenty of time. Let's try 90 seconds of what you would do today. And then I'll back up and I'll show you a story structure that I'm using in my head to think that what would be the best way to do it. You might automatically have it, which would be great. If you don't, we could work on that, and then that becomes the outline for the 20-minute, and we'll have you do the 20-minute. We'll have time.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah. So for 90 seconds, again, we're talking about, hey, you found Mr. or Mrs. Wright in an elevator, and so this is a verbal, spontaneous, casual interaction.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do, Chris?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, 90 seconds on that. So let me pretend we're all scooched in the elevator. I talk about this stuff all the time. So let me just first also tell you, Bob, would it be helpful for me to just give you a sense of what it is that I'll just tell you about the subject first, or should I just go for it?
No, just go for it.
Okay, great. So, great. I'm Chris Neidl. I'm the co-founder of the OpenAir Collective. I've been working on climate for about 20 years and spent most of that time in the renewable energy sector. And then 5 years ago, I made the big leap from renewable energy, which is quite mature, into carbon removal, which you may have never heard about. The scientists talk about it a lot now because it's something we have to do. And that means taking carbon out of the atmosphere, not just stopping it from going up in the atmosphere. And that's important because we have too much in the air already, and we're going to have more. And so when I made this jump, I thought, well, how do I want to have an impact? And a key thing for me was that I wanted to involve as many people as massively as possible who can contribute what they know how to do, what their experiences are, what their talents are, to directly advance and accelerate carbon removal, because we can't do it without mass participation. Where am I at right now in time?
About a minute.
Oh, okay, great. And so how do you do that? And what OpenAir drew on in order to initiate was a very different type of model, and that's open source and peer production, which are models that are used heavily in software and in technology and now in other domains. And they involve mass volunteerism and an open structure that allows people to find each other without friction and to propose and advance ideas by mixing it up with other kinds of brains and people with very, very little barriers in the way to them doing that. We thought that that was the key to really getting as many people into this space as possible and performing with what they know how to do, rather than using a classic label or nonprofit volunteer model, which can be very restrictive. We wanted to be maximum creativity. And therefore we said, let's create an open source network that's focused on advancing carbon dioxide removal.
All right, beautiful. That's about 90 seconds, and that's a chore because
We keep
it's
calling
a
it Bob the
lot
Bob
to do.
Sadler treatment because we know that you're going to give us tough answers. So I was just like, I'm about to get the Bob
No,
here.
I know.
So.
I know. Well, it's always, no matter who it is, it's always pressure. You always feel like, if I don't do this well, I'm not going to get any support. So it's always a judgment situation. It's always tense, and part of the deal is just trying to look and be as relaxed as you can, because the more relaxed you are, the more your voice does the right thing. The more authentic you can become. The more you worry, that it's like that guy that's trying to make a 6-inch putt in the Masters, and he's done 6-inch putts all his life. He can't possibly miss, but if he gets nervous, he's going to pull it to the left. It just isn't your natural thing. And so that's the big job is, how do I relax? So can I share my screen for a moment?
Yeah, screen share is enabled, so you should be able to do that.
Right. So let me do this. I don't like slides generally, but I will give you the slide deck to take away. And this works a little bit easier. I feel very strongly that a leader is really a freely followed person, someone you'd follow regardless of their bureaucratic or constitutional authority. And you don't have any authority, so you really have to lead. And that's kind of how I learned as a community organizer. I never had any authority to do anything, but I could get a lot done. And people follow you because they see in you what are universal human values, which is really honesty, trustworthiness, loyalty, respect, adherence to the law, and be willing to be held accountable, etc. That everything you say, everything you do just exudes that. It's the only way people would follow you. And I think I already see that, Chris, even when I just see you for a moment. What the neuroscience says, as I mentioned, is about 10% of what you have as fact will be useful in turning that person around. But you want to have the fact so that the story you weave with it is a true story. Otherwise, you can't be authentic. And if you get all that going for you, and you are conscious of how you look and can get the best out of your own appearance, that's the kind of skill set that has to come together. And so a story structure that works every time, as far as I'm concerned, the simplest one, the easiest one to remember is this. We have a problem. That problem is bigger than you think, but we have a solution, and the value of that solution is X. And so if you're doing 90 seconds, this is about what the flow should be. We've got a problem. It's bigger than you think, starts at about 30 seconds. At about 60 seconds, they are so worried listening to you about the problem. They are dying for a solution. And that's where the solution gets introduced. This is a very difficult discipline because as scientists and engineers who know what you're talking about, your temptation is to start with facts or by credentializing. And you don't really need to start that way. The start has got to be taking people into what the problem is and making sure they understand that's a big, hairy, complex problem, and there's not much time left by the time you hit 60 seconds. Then you can go to what the solution is. And because you've only got 30 seconds left and not even all of that, it's got to be a really clear, memorable way of saying it. And then the value is, I think, got to come back to that universal human value. And you have, in my mind, the ideal topic for this kind of storyline. We do have a problem. It is bigger than most people think. If they don't believe that it's a problem and feel it and feel the urgency, we aren't going to be able to get the support we need. And you hold a key to 20% of that solution if you look at the climate accord. So it's a big chunk of the solution. And so what I would want to leave people with in 90 seconds is not a detailed description of who I am or what I've done. It's a description of what the problem is and the fact that I've got my hands on a potential solution and you know where to reach me to get the details, or we can even do the details now, if you're interested.
Bob, the part at the end there, when you, just so I understand the dismount there and the value is, I'm a little fuzzy on that, exactly what the, even an example in my particular case, but is it more relating it to those universal values you said about why this is important, or give me a sense of what that last part is.
It's a great question. I think it's both a pithy, measurable kind of value, like this is worth at least half of what the last 20% of the Paris Accord is about, or we need it to get any of that 20% of carbon removal that we're counting on. And without that, my kids aren't going to finish their life in anything like what we know of as life. So
what about
moves it back to universal value.
Does it also, could you end with a, you know, we have the, but we have solutions part. And then I wonder, it is an extension of that is the dismount is if you end with something that is very inviting because it's optimistic, because if we already kind of covered the stakes being so high at the start and at 30 seconds for the first minute, basically, can we end with a, you know, an open air is the place that's making this happen or something to that degree. Everybody's welcome. You know what I mean? Like that kind of idea.
Of course. And something like that is fine. And in fact, to get into it, a hook, a kind of one sentence or one phrase that is very memorable is really called for here. If I said, "What do you do, Chris?" I think it's got to be, I'm working overtime to try to keep our kids, to keep the planet a place where our kids can thrive in something like the way we thrive. It's got to be like a one sentence. Man, I want to hear what this guy has to say.
The one I
think it's a 5-second hook followed by, I'm trying to solve this problem, and the problem is, and then you go up that you're building tension with that. You've seen it in the U.S. and Europe this last year. You can't even take a vacation. I couldn't take a vacation this year, really. I took 2 vacations and I spent it all indoors because it was 95 degrees and hot outside. I mean, it was ridiculous. That's 4 weeks of the summer go on. I mean, people now in Europe are trying to figure out where they're going to go on vacation because they just had 2 years of this, where everything they counted on is not going to happen. You know, it's on us now. So yeah, go ahead, Judy.
I can't find I can't find the raise my hand button.
You
So
do
I'll
it.
just get in line.
That's good. Is there a question?
I'll ask a question, Bob. I went to I'm just wondering how much of this is sort of audience dependent, and in particular, I went to a presentation recently about presenting to rural audiences. I'm not saying that word very well, but conservative rural people generally, and the whole presentation was about how you can't go all climate emergency on them. You can't show them how the world's falling apart. You have to figure out how to make it, the business opportunities or something different from the climate emergency, because they just have a reaction to that. And I'm just wondering how much of your tension thing here is audience dependent. That's my question.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think it is audience dependent. I've been fond of saying a conservative audience to me doesn't look human, but basically they've got the same DNA as we do. And the same with scientists. You look at a scientific audience, especially in some of these other countries, and there's not an emotion on their face. And it just said, well, I can't talk to them like human beings. They're not, but they are, and they are motivated the same way. So I think the difference is you can't any audience go in with a series of facts. It's got to be a story. They will listen to a story. As soon as you start telling a story, your voice changes. And as soon as they start hearing it as a story, their listening capability, that's not a capability, their listening part of the brain shifts. It's that profound. So yeah, I don't think you could go in with a series of facts about the climate change, but I think you could go in with a story. And I was shocked to go to Indiana and just see nothing but windmills. And just said, what the hell? That was not my impression. I saw nothing but windmills. I took a 2-hour drive to Purdue and said, what in the heck? We don't have that many windmills in California. This is a conservative state. What is going on? That would be a good story to open up. I came here thinking, yeah, you people don't know anything. You know a lot more than we do in California. You got windmills all over the damn place. How did you do that? I think there's a way to connect with a storyline, no matter who the audience is. There'd be moments where I'd walk in, and I would give it some thought, but I'd walk in and see an audience, and whatever I planned is just not going to be there. It's just not going to work, and I just have to ad lib. And I might even say that. Yeah, I mentioned I was going to start telling you the story that I planned, and it's all wrong. I'm looking at you, and you're very different than who I thought you were. So let me just say this. It's just start talking with people, and say, I'm really worried. I'm losing a lot of sleep. Help me. I had a very conservative friend who I had dinner with, and I had not a friend. It was a cold call, and I had to raise a lot of money from him. And I didn't. I said, don't send me. I know what his politics are, and he's going to go down the MAGA route, and I'm just, he's never going to talk to us again. And I just went in, and I was the only person, so I just did it. And I went in and just said to him, look, I don't know how we're going to get through this conversation. I'm here to raise money about this photography project, and I know what your politics are, and let's just agree not to start. And he said, okay. And we started talking about what we were supposed to talk about. And then we got past the money raising part. He said, you know, I hope you're not one of these climate activists. It's like he was just picking a fight. All right. And I just said, Joel, I do lose a lot of sleep about climate. And he said, well, I don't know why. It's all fake. And I said, oh, please help me. What do you know that I don't know? And he said, well, it's the volcanoes that are doing it. And I said, tell me more. And we just, you know, and I said, well, there were always volcanoes. And, well, it's a natural cycle. I said, oh, I wish, but I know the natural cycle is supposed to be taking us to ice age. So we're in this is not that part of the cycle. You know, and by the time we got through, he said, okay, all right, we have a problem, but it's not mankind that's causing it. And I said, well, the only problem, so tell me why this isn't true. You know, 1890, and so I showed him the graph. By the time we got through, he was there. It took like 2 hours. He was not a guy you could convince of anything. And he's like a 90-year-old billionaire who watches Fox News all day. I don't believe that. I believe we are all the same DNA, and you got to find a storied connection. So Chris, that's a long-winded answer to say for 90 seconds, I would start with not I'm Chris and here's what I've done. I would start with, because you are very credible and you got a great appearance and you do have a good voice. So you're like way out there already, but I would change the structure to who am I? What do I do? I would start, someone says even, who are you? I just, well, here's what I do. And what's a good hook? If you can't do that hook right at the moment, just say, I'm losing a lot of sleep, or I'm really worried, and then take me 60 seconds into that, make me feel really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
Chris,
I'd love to, after Judy and Carl, if we go back to your little graph there, which is awesome, or your trajectory, I'd love to at least put a couple of bullets as an order there that maybe I could walk through with you. I think would be great, but Judy and Carl.
Sure, great. Awesome. Loving this conversation, Bob, learning a bunch. I do want to kind of tie back to something Chris asked about, again, that sort of closing and the value is, because I had a similar kind of like, that's the part that I'm not quite sure I understand. And I think, Chris, you used the word inviting at some point. You said you want to come up with something that kind of towards the end, the person in the elevator is feeling like, I want to be part of this now. There's something compelling here. I want to participate. That's kind of my sense of what that might mean, that and the value is. It's specifically the value to you, the person I'm talking to. And the example that was coming to mind, because this literally was in an elevator, and sorry, some of you have heard this story, but Senator Cory Booker was standing there and the senator's only elevator door opened, and I backed away because I was like, well, this is only for senators. And he said, no, come on aboard. And so, I had my Citizens Climate Lobby button on my lapel. So that handled the whole, who are you and what do you represent? And it's like, he looked down and he said, oh, Citizens Climate Lobby, tell me what you guys are doing. It was beautiful, right? And I think the part I'm proudest of is at the very end, as he was getting out, I said, by the way, my fellow volunteers are going to be in your office later today, probably scheduled to meet with a staffer. If you popped your head in for even 30 seconds to say hello, that would totally make their day. And he said, I'm going to do that. Now, I don't know if he actually did it, but for me, the opportunity to leave him with a call to action and to have it be something specific that he could do in a short amount of time, to me, that's kind of what I'm getting from the value. Like the value to you, Senator Booker, is you have an opportunity to help advance things and make some people's day for them to to round out your day, you know. So anyway,
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, if you can finish with an ask, by all means, why not? But I think I think the value is literally the value of taking carbon dioxide out of the air. Anything you can do to quantify that value would be helpful, but the quantification of that value should then also be what I value, which is the life of my family and my friends and my community. That's the only way they're going to thrive. So I could take it all the way back to a universal value. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be
you're
would be
causing me to. Oh, I'm sorry. You're making me realize that something that I do say at that moment sometimes is, and what's amazing about this is we can actually restore the climate, not just make
Yeah.
it less bad.
Yeah.
You know, leaving people that sense of a hopeful possibility comes to mind as, and the value is. Okay, no, great. Thank you for all that.
Right. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you for these comments. They're very helpful. And I actually listened to your presentation, or did I read it? I think I listened to it. The one that you have a longer one in OpenAir. And it convinced me that I needed to establish my credibility, my relationship with the audience at the outset. And so that I was trustworthy. And so my presentation that I have outlined, and I guess I'll be doing this next week, it starts out, and I'm saying, I've never been an environmentalist. I thought everything was being taken care of. You know, we had this Paris Accord and all this stuff. And so I spend a while relating to them so I don't come across as just this climate green nut. I guess I could do that fast. These guys, most of these guys have seen the slides and stuff, and I found it comfortable. I haven't done it yet though, because I was waiting for this and waiting for I just climbed Everest this last week. Well, sort of climbed Everest. So I was waiting for that to get behind me, but I'm sure you haven't changed your recommendations, but I surely got a different message from that other slide deck.
Yeah. We absolutely, you need to connect with people. That can be done. I mean, it's hard on Zoom. It can be done with an audience. It can be done on Zoom. With Zoom, you've got to be looking at the camera, which is awkward because the camera in mine is up above the screen. And so I want to be looking at the screen because I want to see your faces. But if I'm talking, looking at your faces is not the same as if I'm looking at the camera. And if I'm in the audience, I want to be making eye contact with various audience members for 2 or 3 seconds at a time. So I don't just look around the audience without making connection. I actually look at somebody until they nod, because they know I'm looking at them. Even if it's 1,000 people, I can look at one person and stay there, and then look at another person and stay there 2, 3 seconds. They will almost always give you one of these. And if they don't, after 3 seconds, I move anyway. But it's got to be looking right at the audience, right at the camera while we're doing that. Also, when I'm looking at your Zoom presentations, I'm seeing people reading their own slides or reading a script, which is over here. And if you're reading a script over here, it sounds like you're reading, which you are. You lose connection there, and then you lose eye contact. You're really wasting that whole 3 or 4 minutes. It's not going to make any impact on anybody. And they're talking too fast to try to get it out of the way. So there's no connection at all in that.
Well, I won't be
So
doing.
I would definitely do that. I think you want to talk to somebody, when I talk to somebody, I want to be Lyle's grandfather. That's how I want to be. I want him to see me as Lyle's grandfather. I don't want him to see me as some expert.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
That's
yeah.
got to be my tone, my choice of words, the way I get into it. When Obama was his kid's father running for office, he was a genius. When he got in as president, he couldn't communicate worth crap for all 4 years. I mean, it was amazing to watch the difference because he was scripted and he was reading, and it just didn't connect. How could you be those two people? But he was. So it's got to come from the heart. And if you forget to say something that you think is important, I would say, because you weren't reading, don't worry about it. If you've made the connection, you'll get a chance to say it. So I would come across as Lyle's grandfather, not as some expert. And everything gets framed in a story, because if I'm Lyle's grandfather, that's what I do. I tell I'm not going to tell him a list of facts. I'm going to tell Lyle a story. The story's going to have a point.
Well,
The story's
I'm
going
not
to
an
have good
expert.
guys and bad guys, right? I mean, that you can take that to the bank.
Okay, good. Well, I'm not an expert, so it's easy not to be an expert.
Well, then don't be,
and-
you know.
And I'm May's grandma, so
That's right. That's it. That's exactly it. That smile is the smile that we're going to love when we hear the presentation.
I love it. Bob, one thing I just put there in the chat, I've shared with Peter and Carl before, is that looking at the arc of the way you have that, we have a problem, but we have solutions, and then the dismount just is such a perfect formula for what people should say when they're in front of their assembly members or their senators and they're testifying at a hearing. So we'll share that with people as we do it, but it would be so cool before the legislative season starts in January if we did one where people could we could do a little workshop specifically on getting ready for hearings. Would be great.
Yeah.